Your dad was a hero? Don't make up stories, kid. The police officer laughed mockingly in the crowded waiting room. The 10-year-old boy clutched a wrinkled photograph, eyes brimming with tears, trying desperately to explain. People around them burst into laughter. Nobody believed him. But just minutes later, an army colonel kicked open the door, face cold as steel, commanding, "Everyone silence! Do you believe truth always finds a way to speak? Type truth if you believe in that." Liam Foster was a skinny 10-year-old boy, living with his mother in a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of town. With his two large second-hand clothes and quiet demeanor, he was easy to overlook. Just another struggling kid from the wrong side of the tracks. His father, Captain Nathan Foster, had gone missing during a classified mission in the Middle East 2 years earlier. Because of the highly secretive nature of the operation, news about Liam's father had never been widely publicized, leaving the boy to bear his grief in relative anonymity. That Thursday afternoon, Liam's mother had taken him to the local police station to report some stolen identification documents, a bureaucratic errand made necessary after their apartment had been broken into the previous weekend. It was just another hardship in a long string of difficulties since Nathan's disappearance. As they filled out paperwork in the waiting area, Liam noticed the station's wall of honor, a display featuring photographs of local military personnel who had made the ultimate sacrifice. His eyes lingered on the arrangement of framed faces, each one representing a story of bravery and loss not unlike his own father's. Gathering his courage, Liam approached the desk sergeant, a middle-aged man whose face showed the weariness of too many shifts and too little appreciation. "Excuse me, sir," Liam said, his voice barely audible above the busy station's background noise. "My dad served too. Would it be okay if his picture went up there?" The desk sergeant glanced down at Liam, taking in his worn sneakers and oversized sweatshirt. His expression shifted from indifference to undisguised skepticism. "Your dad, huh?" he replied with a dismissive chuckle. "What was he, the garbage detail? Don't make up stories for attention, kid." Liam's face flushed red, but he stood his ground. Reaching into his backpack, he carefully extracted a dog-eared photograph, his father in full combat gear, dog tags gleaming against his dust-covered uniform. The picture had been taken just days before his final mission. Several people in the waiting area had begun to pay attention to the exchange. A few chuckled at the sergeant's remark. Others watched with varying degrees of curiosity and amusement. "Look," someone whispered loudly enough to be heard, "the kid thinks telling tall tales will get him special treatment." Liam's mother, Sarah, rushed over, her face a mixture of embarrassment and protective anger. She placed a gentle hand on her son's shoulder, trying to guide him back to their seats. "Come on, Liam," she whispered. "This isn't the place." But Liam hesitated, then turned back to the desk. With dignified silence that seemed beyond his years, he carefully placed the photograph on the counter. There was no accusation in his eyes, only a profound sadness that no child should have to carry. The desk sergeant made a dismissive gesture, pushing the photo back toward Liam. "Take it home, kid. We don't put up fake heroes here." A few more laughs rippled through the waiting area. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she guided her son back to their seats, her arm wrapped protectively around his thin shoulders. Liam clutched the photograph to his chest as if it were the most precious thing in the world, which to him, it was. The desk sergeant turned to his colleague with an exaggerated eye roll. "Can you believe these people? Everybody wants to be special somehow." As Liam sat down, his posture seemed to collapse inward, as if trying to make himself as small as possible. His fingers traced the edges of the photograph frame, a ritual of remembrance he had performed countless times since his father had failed to return home. Sarah held her son close, whispering words of comfort that both knew could never fill the void left by Nathan's absence. In that moment, they were utterly alone in a room full of people who had already dismissed them as forgettable. Liam sat quietly on the bench, clutching the framed photo tightly against his chest, his head resting on his mother's shoulder. The weight of public humiliation pressed down on his small frame, making him seem even more fragile than he already was. A skinny, solitary boy, desperately trying to preserve a fragment of memory about his father, cruelly mocked without mercy. The desk sergeant continued his commentary, loud enough for nearby officers and civilians to hear. "Bet his dad never fired a shot outside of video games. he snickered, glancing toward Liam to ensure his barb had landed. A woman walking past Sarah and Liam shook her head and murmured to her companion, "Poor kid, but you can't believe everything these days." Liam didn't cry. He simply held the photograph tighter, as if afraid that if he loosened his grip, the memory of his father would dissolve like morning mist. His face remained composed, but the slight tremble in his lower lip betrayed the storm of emotions behind his careful facade. Sarah whispered something in his ear, trying to distract him while they waited for their paperwork to be processed. But her eyes kept darting toward the desk sergeant, a mixture of helplessness and fury evident in her gaze. Unknown to everyone, a young receptionist named Marcus Collins, a former Army specialist who had recently taken a civilian position at the station, had witnessed the entire exchange. Having served himself, something about the boy's demeanor and the photograph had struck a chord with him. Unable to tolerate the injustice any longer, Marcus discreetly sent a text message to several contacts he still maintained in the military. The message was simple. A boy, son of a missing captain, is being ridiculed at the Station 14. Name is Foster. What Marcus couldn't have anticipated was that his message would reach Colonel Samuel Grant, commanding officer of the nearby Fort Baxter military base. The name Foster had immediately caught the colonel's attention. Just 40 minutes later, the distinctive sound of military-grade tires on asphalt drew attention outside the police station. A black SUV with government plates pulled up directly in front of the entrance, ignoring the no parking signs. Colonel Grant emerged, ramrod straight posture, immaculate uniform, and a gaze that could cut through steel. His face was a mask of controlled fury as he strode toward the station doors. Without waiting for an invitation, he pushed through the doors into the waiting area. Every head turned as his commanding presence filled the room. The casual conversations died instantly as he marched directly to the desk sergeant's position. "Who did you just disrespect?" he demanded, his voice quiet but carrying a razor's edge that sliced through the sudden silence. The desk sergeant stammered, his earlier confidence evaporating under the colonel's withering gaze. Just a kid, making up stories." Colonel Grant slammed a folder down on the desk with enough force to make everyone in the vicinity jump. "This is the classified file of Captain Nathan Foster, the man who saved my life and the lives of 23 other soldiers during the Sakar operation, the man this boy calls his father." The waiting room went completely silent. Those who had been laughing just moments earlier now stared at their shoes, unwilling to meet anyone's eyes. For his part, Liam remained frozen on the bench, his eyes wide with shock and growing recognition. Even Sarah seemed unable to process the sudden turn of events, her hand covering her mouth as tears began streaming down her face. The desk sergeant's face had drained of all color. "Sir, I didn't know." "No, you didn't know," Colonel Grant cut him off. "Yet you chose to mock a child's grief rather than show basic human decency. There are truths that don't need to be shouted. They only require one person brave enough to speak for those who cannot. If you believe honor should always be defended, type truth right now to stand with those who cannot stand for themselves." Colonel Grant turned to address everyone in the waiting room, his voice projecting the authority of someone accustomed to command. "Attention, everyone. You will all stand at respect position to honor Captain Nathan Foster." The room collectively rose to their feet, uncertain but compliant under the colonel's unwavering gaze. Sarah held Liam tightly, her shoulders trembling with silent sobs of vindication and renewed grief. Colonel Grant approached Liam, his stern expression softening slightly as he knelt to the boy's eye level. From his uniform pocket, he withdrew a Bronze Star medal, carefully pinning it to Liam's worn sweatshirt. "On behalf of your father," the colonel said, his voice gentler now, "who sacrificed in silence so that we could sit safely here today." The weight of the medal against his chest seemed to straighten Liam's posture. For the first time since entering the police station, his eyes held something besides sadness, a flicker of pride. Those same people who had laughed at Liam less than an hour earlier now stood at attention, many offering formal salutes to the small boy they had so readily dismissed. The desk sergeant was immediately suspended pending an investigation, escorted from his position by two fellow officers who couldn't meet his eyes. By evening, the local newspaper had picked up the story, "Boy mocked for honoring father, turns out to be son of classified war hero." Veterans organizations throughout the city established a scholarship fund in Captain Nathan Foster's name to assist other children of military personnel who had fallen or gone missing in action. Within a week, Liam received an official invitation to visit Fort Baxter, where service members lined up in two perfect rows to welcome him as one of their own, the son of a brother-in-arms who had given everything for his country and his fellow soldiers. During the visit, Colonel Grant bent down and whispered to Liam, "Your father never leaves you, son. He lives in every brave breath you take." Liam clutched the medal on his chest, offering a tentative smile, the first genuine smile his mother had seen in the 2 years since Nathan's disappearance. The police department issued a formal apology to the Foster family, and the chief of police personally visited their apartment to express his regret over the incident. More importantly, he brought news. Captain Foster's photograph would be given a place of honor, not just at the police station, but at City Hall as well. A month later, the city held an official memorial service for Captain Nathan Foster. The once unassuming community center was filled beyond capacity with military personnel, police officers, and citizens touched by the story of a boy's unwavering faith in his father's heroism. Liam was invited to accept a certificate of recognition and read a message he had written himself. "Dad, I'm proud of you. I'll try to live worthy of your name." There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Sarah Foster, who had struggled alone to raise her son while processing her own grief, found herself surrounded by an extended family she never knew existed. Military spouses who understood her unique pain, veterans who shared stories of Nathan's kindness and courage, community members offering practical support and friendship. The desk sergeant who had mocked Liam eventually requested a meeting with the boy and his mother. His apology was sincere, if awkward. "I forgot what it means to serve," he admitted. "Your father reminded me through you." As for Colonel Grant, he became a regular visitor to the Foster household, serving as an unofficial mentor to Liam. Under his guidance, the boy began to collect stories about his father, not just the classified missions, but the small moments of humanity that truly defined the man. How Nathan had taught younger recruits to write letters home, how he carried extra socks for everyone in his unit, how he never forgot a birthday despite being deployed. Through these stories, Captain Nathan Foster began to live again in his son's heart. No longer just a static image in a photograph, but a full-bodied memory of a man who had loved his family as fiercely as he had served his country. When asked by a reporter if he was angry about how he had been treated at the police station, Liam thought for a moment before answering with wisdom beyond his years. "I was sad, not angry. But now I think maybe it happened so other people like my dad won't be forgotten." Years later, Liam Foster followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a military officer himself. On his desk beside his lamp always stood that same weathered photograph, his father in uniform, with that gentle smile that time could never erase. Whenever anyone asked why he had joined the service, Liam would smile thoughtfully and reply, "Because some debts of honor can only be repaid with a lifetime of service." The story of the boy who stood up for his father's memory became legendary at Fort Baxter. New recruits would hear it during orientation, a reminder that heroism often went unrecognized, and that respect was not a gift bestowed, but a right earned through sacrifice. The incident sparked changes within the police department as well. They instituted a new training program focused on respectful interaction with military families, particularly those who had experienced loss. The wall of honor that had first caught Liam's attention was expanded and moved to a more prominent location in the main lobby. Each year on the anniversary of Captain Foster's disappearance, a small ceremony was held at that wall. Liam, now tall and strong like his father had been, would stand at attention beside his mother, both of them placing a single white rose beneath Nathan's photograph. Colonel Grant, even after retirement, never missed these ceremonies. "Your father," he once told Liam, "taught me that a leader's true strength isn't measured by the commands he gives, but by the lives he touches." Perhaps the most meaningful legacy, however, was the subtle change in how people treated each other in that community. When encountering a child with a story that seemed too big to be true, people began to listen more carefully, remembering a boy who had once stood alone against disbelief, clutching a photograph of his hero. Honor is not a medal to be awarded. It is a flame passed from one heart to another, illuminating lives long after the original bearer has gone. If you believe stories of loyalty and courage deserve to be told forever, Subscribe to TT Hero Stories. TT Hero Stories. Because some heroes never stop serving.